Hi, this is Chris Cole from Sweet Valley Hives. In this video, we're going to look at the thermodynamics, if you will, of a Warre hive. One of the questions we get a lot of times, and we see it actually a lot on the forums, is how many boxes should I go into winter? How many boxes should I have on my Warre hive when I go into winter? Should I be taking boxes off? Should I be leaving them on? So we're going to give you a kind of a quasi-scientific look at what's happening as we see it inside the hive. You can agree, disagree, and make your decisions based on what I'm about to tell you. So if we look at your standard Warre hive, there's 3 boxes. We're into the winter now, and the cluster is formed, and they're kind of right up at the top. Above this, that could be a super, could be a quilt box. So let's look at what happens. As the cluster, what we know, they're producing heat. But what happens to heat? Anywhere heat is produced, it always rises naturally. So the heat's going to rise up. If this is a quilt box, okay, if we call this the quilt box, the heat is going to be reflected back down partially. Some of it will make its way up into the quilt box, but the purpose of the quilt box is to reflect that, to insulate, to absorb the moisture, but not so much the heat. So the heat starts to form until the cluster is fully enveloped in the heat that they're creating. At that point, it just becomes a maintenance process for the colony. All they need to do is maintain that heat, and it's much easier to maintain it than it is to create it, okay? So at that point, there it is. That's where the heat is. Now the cold air, on your bottom board, you're going to have your entrance. If you have a screen bottom board, it might be closed off, it might not. But for the most part, your entrance is still going to be allowing the cold air to blowing in. And the cold air is going to be collecting down in this bottom box. So the question becomes, should I take this box off and drop this cluster down closer to this cold air pocket? We say no. Actually, what I'd say is how many boxes you have below the cluster is irrelevant. And probably 3 is the minimum that we would do. And every year we go into our winters in northeastern Pennsylvania with 3, 4, and we've gone in with as many as 5 boxes. But I will not go with 2. I'm not going to drop this cluster down closer to this colder temperature. It just doesn't make sense for us. Now, cold air, here's the point. Cold air does not rise. Okay, cold air is going to stay where you put it. So all you would do in bringing this cluster down or removing this box or this box, whatever, is bringing the cluster down closer to where the draftiness and the cold air is. Okay, one last point. If this is not a quilt box, let's assume that your quilt box is up here and that this is a super, which, by the way, we do sell supers here at Sweet Valley Hives. We'll make a separate video on that. If that is a super, then the heat is actually going to rise up into the super until it hits the quilt box. So the bees, they might migrate up into here, they might not, but it is a larger space for them to heat if that's a super, because the heat's going to now rise up into there before it gets reflected into the quilt box. So you have to be careful if you have a super on there and you leave it on, and we've done that this year in 2017, but ours was filled with comb and honey, and we thought the trade-off of the extra heat being produced, trading off with that large source of food for them over the winter was a good trade, and that they're going to be okay. But the point is that the bees only heat where their cluster is. They don't heat the rest of the hive, and that seems to be the concern, that leaving extra boxes on leaves them all that extra space to heat. It doesn't. They don't. If they were to heat this bottom box, the temperature up here would have to be incredible for the heat to be able to move all the way down to heat that box. So they don't heat these lower boxes, they only heat where they are. I hope this makes sense to you, and I hope that it aids you into your decisions on how to manage your hives going into winter. I'm Chris Cole with Sweet Valley Hives. Check us out on Facebook or at sweetvalleyhives.com on our website. Thanks for watching.